think it was my oldest two. I don't remember who specifically piped in first, but they're like, how on earth does what you think about create money?
Mm.
And I'm like, oh boy. I feel like one, how to explain that to a 9, 10-year-old,
Yeah.
near ten
Yeah.
year old is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But also potentially they might understand it faster.
Well, welcome everyone to today's episode of TMI Advice You Didn't Want. Today we're diving into the Olympics just ended. What was it, a week ago? Less than? I don't even remember. But
Um,
it hasn't been that long since the Olympics ended. And we're going to talk a little bit about success by association. We're going to talk about choking under pressure, like all the things that happen when you're performing at high levels that can happen to anybody at any time. So, in case we haven't met, my name is Karen.
And my name is Ashley. And yeah, the whole Olympics, like watching it, I'm not a big Olympic watcher. I used to watch a couple of things, but never was too huge into it. But my cousin was in this Olympics and the last Olympics, so then I definitely watched like his category, and it was like insane because they just talk the whole time about how it's a mental game and there's so much riding on the mental game. Like all of them have won medals in the worlds or previous Olympics and things like that, or not all of them, but a lot of them, like they know they're at the top. And it's all just really who gets the best dives that day and who can keep it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll never forget. I was talking to one of the nurses that I used to work with a long time ago. Um, he was talking about how he was a professional snowboarder.
Mm.
And he said when he got to a certain level that he pretty much had to, it wasn't a therapist, but it was just basically a mind coach, basically
Mhm.
somebody that could kind of help him talk through and not focus on the negative of what could happen if he didn't land a jump. Because the thing that he told me, he said, he was performing at such a high level that if he had done any one single mistake, he could be dead. And so
Mhm.
he had to really get into his mind game and really realize that he could not sit and continue to think about disaster catastrophe because that's what he would have created, and he knew
Yeah.
that. And it's funny because this conversation came up because he and I were talking about meditation, what are the thoughts that you're thinking, how we're creators, that whole thing. And he started telling me that he's been a meditator since he was a child,
Mhm.
and he actually grew up in Vietnam,
Mm.
and he's been a meditator since he's been a child, and then he got into snowboarding and professional snowboarding, and he quit a long time ago, but because he's a nurse now, but he basically was just talking about how he really had to get into his mental game because he got to a point where he was afraid, and he knew that if he wanted to compete at a high level, he couldn't be afraid. He
Mhm.
couldn't let the fear of what might happen in a catastrophic way actually hold him back. And
Mhm.
so he, along with other people that are performing in that kind of sense, can have mind coaches that can kind of help them realize that your thoughts are things. You can't sit here and think about it. If you have this thought that pops in your head, it's your choice, okay? I'm going to say this again because this is really important. If you have a thought that pops in your head and you do not like it, it is your choice to continue to think about it. It is
Mhm.
your choice to continue to entertain it. And he had to realize that, as far as like, if I make a jump and I do it wrong, then I can die. And so he couldn't
Yeah.
think about that. He couldn't spend the time thinking about that. He had to visualize how he wanted the jump to go. He had to
Mhm.
visualize what it was going to feel like, how he was going to act, how he was going to think, feel, behave, the whole thing, right? And that's really huge for anybody that's doing the Olympics too, right? Like the Olympics, this is a high level performance, and you really have to know that you can't be thinking about those negative things. And I think that when we do start to kind of sit and think about that a little too long, that's when we do make those mistakes. And I see this in my life when I start to look at the thing that I don't want and I continue to entertain the thought, that's when I start to create that in my reality.
Mhm.
And anybody that sits and just looks at themselves and seriously looks at themselves and goes, oh, that's how I created that. And you really
Yeah.
do understand that at the end of the day, when you think like this, you are the creator. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and even having that conversation with my kids, like, can't remember how it started or where the conversation started, but I was talking about how what you think brings about how healthy you are, how successful you are, how confident you are, how smart you are. And I think it was my oldest two. I don't remember who specifically piped in first, but they're like, how on earth does what you think about create money?
Mm.
And I'm like, oh boy. I feel like one, how to explain that to a 9, 10 year old,
Yeah.
near 10
Yeah.
year old is interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But also potentially they might understand it faster.
Mm-hmm.
And then my thoughts were a lot of the time when I was in network marketing, I'd have like top leaders talk about how they would have like Think and Grow Rich constantly playing in audio or something from another top speaker or author, and they would constantly have like those like think Think and Grow Rich type of books playing over their house speaker. So like no matter what they were doing, they were listening to it. And for me, it's a little bit of a sensory overload. So
Mm.
I've done it a couple of times, but never was really one that stuck with it that much. Um, and so with my kids, I'm like, oh, that might be something I should start doing again because then they're hearing it and it's kind of like an instant download. And for whatever reason, this summer, I feel like myself and my two sons were just like brain fried. Like, I don't know what's going on, but them especially, like, they just are doing a lot of things without thinking, breaking things that doesn't make sense. Like there's just a lot of things where it's like, what? Like, how is this computing? And they'll do it, and I'm just like, I will look at them just like that and be like, what? What? Like, what part of you thought that that made sense in the moment? And I had a chiropractor say do jumping jacks to get your brain stimulated and get your like your neurology firing. And so we were like, okay, let's do some jumping jacks, get that brain working kind of thing. And then I overheard my daughter, because she's usually not on the same page. Like sometimes she has her brain stop in our words. And I'll talk about myself. I'm like, oh, my brain stopped working. I don't know, can't remember what I was gonna say, or can't remember this. And then I heard her being to one of the boys. She's like, "Oh man, your brain is not working right now." I was like, "Holy shit!" We have a whole family saying and affirming brains not working, and I was like, "That language needs to change real fast."
Mm-hmm.
And I was just like using it as like joking. Okay, our brains aren't working. It's time for jumping jacks. Like, So yeah,
Yeah.
but
So there's something in science called mirror neurons. And your
mhm,
mirror neurons, when this is how we learn to do anything in life, right? When we were toddlers and we saw a grown adult around us walking, we said, oh, I can do that. So
mhm,
it's the same thing when you're the adult and you're teaching kids. Kids are going to watch you and they're going to literally mirror you. A mirror neuron is exactly that. Like you show, they do. Like
yeah,
it's that kind of concept. And that's where the whole playing the Think and Grow Rich in the background super helpful because you're associating yourself, you're associating your mirror neurons
yeah.
with that topic. But what I found to be so much more influential and so much more powerful is if I can not hear what you're saying, but watch you.
Mm.
That is where I really, and I believe that all of us do this too. I
Mhm.
think that it's not just a limited to me thing, that if I can watch you and you're who I want to emulate, then that's way more powerful than if you say or whatever, anything. Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to say anything because your actions and the way that you do things
Mhm.
are showing me what I need to do. And so that's one of the reasons that I think like being a parent to me is like so overwhelming because I look at myself and I'm like, ooh, what would I pass to other people? And I
Yeah.
look at it's funny, the more that I get in tune with myself and the more time that I spend with my parents, I go, God damn. Like
Yeah.
you think that you start to end up being like your parents the older you get? No. The moment you came out and you created those mirror neurons and you started doing what that's when you started doing what they did.
Yeah.
That was the moment because you are literally seeing. It's just sometimes I think when we get older, we get more reflective over ourselves and we go,
Yeah.
oh, my mom did that. Oh, my dad did that. And now I'm doing that. No, you've been doing it the whole time. I promise you.
Well, a couple of thoughts come to mind with that. So one, for me, I was always a very strange child. Like my mom
Mhm.
was, oh, you're so weird. But then as a parent, then that's where I'm seeing it, right? Because I don't know what kind of person my mom was with her friends and socially and like that kind of thing. And so I don't think we were probably that similar because she keeps on being like, you're so weird, you're so different. But when it comes to parenting style, that's what I watched her. I watched her
Mm.
as a parent. And so when I parent, Derek will be like, oh my gosh, I heard your mom in that. And be it's like, wow, kind of thing. And then two, with the children, so we were all at the community pool the other day, and there's a lot of people that know me, and like I always introduce myself initially as stepmom, and then after that, I just don't. And mostly just because I don't really care if it's stepmom, mom, Ashley, like those kind of titles. It doesn't really matter to me, but I don't want to get confused. Um, because then if they're like texting me, I want them to know which parent I am. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And so I had someone that probably just never had a formal introduction with me, and she was talking with Derek, and somehow it came out, and she was like, "What? Those aren't Ashley's biological children." And she's like none of them, and like not even the youngest, because I volunteer a lot with my youngest in the school, just because the younger you are, the more opportunity there is for volunteering. And Derek's like, no, like, but they look like her. And he's like, I know. And like people will joke, like people that have known me like forever, and they'll be like, how did you somehow become a stepmom to three kids that look like they're yours? Like,
Mhm.
because they are very similar. I actually think my daughter looks very similar to my mom too. And I'm like, it's because when you're around people, like it changes you.
Mhm.
And especially with my daughter, Derek is like, holy fuck. Like he's like, I'm in so much trouble. You guys are the exact same. And it's like, yeah, because she spends so much time with me. Like,
Mhm.
and somehow, right from the get-go, she already had similar interests to me right in the beginning. And so then it kind of like accumulated and built up. But it's like who you spend time with is who you become like for sure. And
Mhm.
she is a Klingon. Like she's like like when a dog follows you to the bathroom, she's going into grade 5 and she will follow me to the bathroom. She will follow me every single place I go. Like there's no like you think at that age it stops, but not for her. But then there's my second thought, and this is completely kind of different, but the kids have two homes. And this last week, so my youngest usually calls his biological mom my other mom. And this last week, he started calling her opposite mom.
Ah.
And he started. Yeah. And he started saying at my opposite house, because we had friends down from Saskatchewan. So if he ever was telling them a story about his other home, he would say at my opposite mom and at my opposite house. And he's never said that before, ever. He just started last week in our house. Maybe he has to other people. I've never heard him say it until now. And I was just like, that is like freaking hilarious. Like that he's calling it
Mm,
that. Whether he like
yeah.
I don't think it's conscious. Like I think it's
No.
so
Yeah.
subconscious.
Hmm.
And then we all were at the beach and we're like, okay, guys, we're gonna go home now. And the kids, the boys were playing in the water and just having the time of their life. We didn't see them for hours. They were just like, did not stop. And then my two friends and Derek and my daughter were sitting on the beach. And Aubrey, my daughter, was like, oh, and initiating Knox's tantrum and tears and screaming now. I was like, what? What are you talking about? She's like, oh, he's gonna have a tantrum and not and screaming how he doesn't want to leave. I'm like, why would he do that? And she's like, well, that's what he does every time. And this was day two, day two of her being in our house. And I'm just like, I've never witnessed that in my life. He's never acted like that ever. And I was like, watch, he won't do it. And I said, okay, Knox, time to go. He's like, okay. I'm like, can you pack up your sand toys? Yeah. And just like, and good to go. And he was completely regulated, completely fine. And so I'm like, who are these three kids when they're not here?
Hmm.
I would love, and like that's where it's so interesting is how they like, unless she's not telling the truth, maybe it happened once, but
Hmm.
she said at the other house, every single time we say we're leaving the park, we're leaving the beach, we're leaving this, he has a tantrum. And so, like, is that like if it is true, like, how is it that they can become two completely different people into two completely different homes? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it's very interesting.
Well, I do believe that we have the ability to rapidly change like that. And I think as kids, we do have that possibility to create that rapid change even faster because they are learning at such an accelerated rate. I do think that, so as we get older, we start to, um, sit into set programs. So by the age of 35, we now are pretty
Yeah.
set in the programs that we're going to be living in. But
Mhm.
before you get there, you can have those quick shifts. And I can see how that is truly the case even in my life, where
Mm.
it would be a lot easier to make quick shifts. And I mean, just think about whenever we were kids, and I remember having this one friend that I would just act differently around.
Hmm.
It's to me, it's no different. It's no different when you're around certain people, you act one way, and then when you're around another set of people, you act a different way. It's those mirror neurons. And as we get older, it's not that we stop doing it, but we start to go, nope, this is the way that I am. And so
Mhm.
we make a more firm decision that this is the way that we are. And like you've created these neurons in your brain that fire together more consistently, right? That's really
Yeah.
all it is. You've just created a pattern in your brain. But now, like if I would think about like acting differently in front of certain people, that just makes me want to ew. But I did that so easily when I was younger. So
Yeah. I
I
don't
don't I don't
know if
know.
I did. I was very different because like my family's not religious. My parents are both atheists and I was Christian. I was religious. And I literally would have my mom be like, you need to stop. And
You need
uh
to stop.
she hated religion.
I
And
get it.
um and so she did not want me being a believer. She didn't want me going to church. She didn't want me reading the Bible. And she didn't like it. And I never changed for her. I went to a school where everyone partied and all that kind of stuff. And from very like Aubrey's age, we were introduced to partying already, which is insane when I think about how complete like if I put me and her together at the same age, she is completely naive to all of it. Like it's unbelievable. I'm grateful for that for her. But yeah, so I don't know. It's just I never really felt that. I've always been really me and
Hmm.
very open about that. So to me to watch them change so fluidly, it's kind of scary, to be honest, when I watch it and be like, okay, well, which one's the real one and which one's gonna stick and all that kind of stuff. Um, but yeah, for me, I've always been very different than the people around me and had to find people that felt right. Um, oh, what
Yeah,
was I
I would
going
definitely agree with that too. I've never really been the same as anyone else. But like
Yeah.
I said, there was one friend that I was like, I want to fit in with you. And
Mm,
that's pretty common, honestly, when you're growing up, especially. You're like, I want to fit in with you. And so, what do I have to do in order to fit in?
yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, and like now as an adult, like especially with school parents, I won't I won't have verbal diarrhea. Like I used to have verbal diarrhea and people would be like, "Ooh, like you're definitely very religious and I'm not." And like that kind of thing. I would very much speak my mind.
Yeah.
Um, but with like where I'm at now, I'm like, I know I'm leaning pretty hard to the spiritual conspiracy theory side,
Hmm.
and I don't need to like offend people and all that kind of stuff. If it comes up, I'm gonna speak my truth.
Hmm.
But like if there's a conversation, I don't need to ruffle the feathers, you know? And so I'll do that where I'm like,
Hmm.
I consciously am like, I don't need to be the devil's advocate. I used to love being the devil's advocate. And so
Ah.
now I'll be like, no, just don't. Like you're good. And um but yeah, that's not really pretending. I listen and participate in the conversation. Maybe do a couple of sentences that are a little bit different, but I don't go full-fledged into where I am. But one of the kids' friends, moms, I don't, last week at the pool, I was talking a little bit about it because she asked about one of my posts I made, and she's like, "You're not a flat earther, are you?" And I just smiled and like. Technically, no, but I really easily could be. I'm like, I could go, I'm pretty much like 60-40 on that one. I haven't done enough research and played around with it enough to really have a valid, like, this is where I stand kind of thing. But I definitely could sway both ways. She was like, oh boy.
Yeah, I personally just yeah, I don't get into that stuff because I'm like, does it matter?
Well, and I think that's where I'm at too. I think
Yeah.
that sometimes it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's fun to
Sure.
go down that rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like the whole flat earth one is really fun in
Mm-hmm.
my world. But at the same time, it's like I've never put time and effort really to go down it because at the end of the day, whether the earth is flat or round, it doesn't matter. Whether there's something hidden in Antarctica, I'm not going to be the one that figures it out, and I don't really care. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, and the fact that you said I'm not going to be the one that figures it out, like you created that. Like you just created that
It's
right
not
now.
my life purpose.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
I don't feel that calling to it.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel a calling to helping people in the way that like we talk about, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
having not surface level conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Like that really speaks to me like taking courses and learning and growing as an individual. But the Antarctica thing is like reading a fantasy book. It's just fun and exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there's no reason. that you can't be like, oh, this is fun and exciting, because we all have that with different things where we're like, oh, I just really like it. I don't know why. Like, I don't know why I like it, but I do, right? But it doesn't have to like keep us from our, like you said, your life purpose. So,
Yeah.
which for you and I truly believe is just talking about the things that actually matter, which are, what are your thoughts? What are you thinking? How did you create that?
Yeah.
Like, and it, because it's really like, people always think like manifestation is like this magical thing, and it's really not that magical. You
Mhm.
created it because you thought it. Like,
Yeah.
this is literally science now, people. Like,
Yeah.
you can literally read this in science books. And
Yeah.
it's crazy to me that it's still looked at as pseudoscience, because it's like, no, actually, they did a lot of research to prove that your thought created that. And they've
Yeah.
actually discovered like brain waves. That's
Yeah.
not new. Like, I could hook you up to an EEG monitor right now and you would show brain waves.
Yeah.
Hello, like, how
And
does your microwave cook? Like when
yeah.
you really start thinking about this stuff, you're like, oh my God, I did create that. Holy shit.
And that's where I'm also like fairly passionate too, is getting people out of like the traditional, which is
Mm,
not really traditional. It's like the current way people do everything. It's like there's so many more effective ways. Like, and that's where I'm more like that conspiracy theorist because I'm like, why are we injecting our bodies? Why are we
mm,
taking medication? There's so many more effective ways to thrive, and it just doesn't make sense, but they're labeled as pseudoscience. And that's one of the things, like when we were going through court, um, we were saying like we need to be able to make final decision making because my partner's ex doesn't believe in chiropractic care for kids, even though it was recommended. And he's like, what? Like that's like a normal Western medicine thing. The lawyer said this. And I'm
it
like,
used to not be.
I'm like, no, people view chiropractics as pseudoscience.
Hmm.
He's like, no, they don't. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And literally 3 months later, we specifically had a fight over chiropractic care.
Mm,
And I was like, see, I told you. Like,
mm,
for whatever reason, people are like, ooh, the chiropractor's bad. And even they're trying to take away their ability to take x-rays and
mm.
stuff because they're not real doctors. I'm like, what is going on? Like,
Yeah.
it's so weird.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, when you really get familiar with your body and like what it needs, like the whole like people do not realize how detrimental like screens and lack of sleep and crappy food is. Like even I was joking with my kids because I randomly watched TikTok about how there's kids that have nearly died from drinking a Slurpee.
Hmm.
And because the I think it's glycerin is too high for them for their
Mm,
bodies,
mm.
and it shuts down. I think it's their breathing. I can't remember too much. And they
That
showed
makes
up in our
sense.
house on a switch day with Slurpees, and I had just watched it that day. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. And so I showed them the TikTok, and I'm like, or
Don't drink
even
it too fast.
yeah. Well, it wasn't about how fast, it was about how much you drank.
Ah,
And so
got it.
um, and my friend here, he's my friends that were visiting, I mentioned already in the podcast, they're from Cuba and then they lived in Spain and his family's all in Spain. And he's like, yeah, if you look at the ingredients that are on the products in Spain versus here, they're two completely different products.
Mm,
Like what we feed kids and what we feed ourselves here in North America, it's illegal over there. Like
mm,
you can't find it. And like there isn't Slurpees in Spain. Like he's
mm.
like, I've never seen that before. Like it's here. And like people wonder why we're struggling so much with our mental health, with ADHD, with anxiety, with depression, with cancer, all that kind of stuff. I think the cancer stat, you would know this probably way better than me, is like 1 in 2 people now
It's
that are going
pretty
to have
bad.
cancer.
It's getting up there with like it. it actually might have overcome. I'd have to look this up. I'm not going to say it because I don't remember stats like that. But yes, it's not good. Let's just say that. It's not good. I can
And when
tell
you
you,
think
I see
about
new
it,
people all the time on my Facebook feed getting
yeah.
diagnosed with cancer, and it's like that's sad. Ugh.
Yeah. Well, and it was like the whole anxiety, depression, like I would say like 15 years ago. It was like became safe to talk about anxiety and depression. And I think it became safe to talk about it because everyone had it, you
Mm-hmm.
know? And it's like normal to have anxiety and depression now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not.
It's not normal. I'm sorry. It's not okay. And like, I was having this conversation at the hospital the other day, and I didn't push it too hard because I was like, this person isn't going to fully understand what I'm saying. But um, she was talking about having ADHD, right? And she was talking about how like her brain just wouldn't shut up. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've been there." Like I literally have not slept 4 days because my brain won't shut the fuck up. Like I know how that feels. I know exactly what that looks like, but I
Yeah.
don't do that anymore. And she looked at me like, "Oh yeah, I don't either because I'm on meds." And I'm like, no, I don't either because I'm not on meds. Like I'm not taking something to create this in my body. And there's probably going to be people out there that are like, Karin, that's shit. Like that's not real. Like you didn't really have it. No, I'm telling you, like ask my husband how I can really get obsessive about things. Like I can literally, I mean, you even know, Ashley, you've
Yeah.
even seen me in some ways where I get super obsessive about certain things.
Yeah.
That's ADHD. Hello. But
Yeah.
I decided 4 years ago that I was tired of doing that to myself. I was tired of like the constant obsessing, the constant thoughts. Like you can have a day where you're not constantly thinking about something. I know that's
Mhm.
probably going to blow a lot of minds out there, but you do not have to think about things. And I taught myself to do this. And I did it like one of the biggest things that I did, one of the biggest tools I used was meditation, but there are other things you can use.
Mhm.
Just by simply sitting there and focusing on your breath, yes, that's a form of meditation, but just focusing on your breath, you're not having a like conscious monkey mind thought going through your head all the time. You can just go in and out with your breath, but most of us don't know how to do that. Most
Mhm.
of us just say, "Oh, I just need a pill to stop it because my hormones are fucked up." Well, your hormones are fucked up because you've been thinking like a crazy person. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, you've literally been thinking, and now your body is like, "Oh, instead of you thinking, maybe I'll just create this hormone for you. You don't even have to do it for yourself. I'll do it. You've told me to do it enough." Like
Yeah.
this is just the patterns that we create. We talked about those mirror neurons. We talked about those neural networks in our brain where we have one thought and it fires with this other neuron in my brain, and then I fire another one, I fire another one, I fire another one, and now before I know it, I am like bouncing off the walls, obsessing over one little thing or not able to finish a task. Like I was literally the poster child for starting something, going to the next thing, going to the next thing, going back to the first thing, going to a new thing. Like I was the poster child for that, and I was
Yeah.
exhausted all the time. But I
Mhm.
had trained myself to do that.
Yeah.
We can at any point say, I don't want to keep doing this. We can
Mhm.
at any point say, I'm done. Now, I will tell you, it's not easy. It's not like I'm just done and I'm going to stop doing this immediately. You've been training yourself to do that for so long. So now it's time to train yourself to do something different so that you can create
Well,
something different.
and like for me, it was I'm the same way, and I don't see it as a negative thing. Like, and I've watched lots of like documentaries of people that are successful in business because they are able to hyper focus, they are able to multitask and do all that kind of stuff. And so I can look back and see how having those problems that are things that you need to take medication for, they've actually aided me in my success. And so I'm at this same point in my life, I haven't mastered any of those things like you have. And I'm still the one like rabbit, squirrel here, there kind of person. But if I have systems, it works for me. Like it's not something that I feel is like, oh, this is really negative on my life
Yeah.
and all
For
of
me,
that.
I
So yeah.
wasn't present. That's really what it came
Mhm.
down to. I wasn't present. It was like,
Yeah.
oh, I have to do this. And while I was doing that one thing, I was thinking about doing the next thing. And so then I would
Oh
do
yeah.
it. And then I would think about the next thing. And then I would think, and so that's not presence.
Mhm.
You're not doing the thing. You're not getting there. And I would definitely argue that if you're doing that, that how can you be present? Like if your
Mhm.
mind is racing like that, how can you really be present? I would
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I
yeah.
have the racing mind, but it's like I go and do something and then I take something from my office into the kitchen and I'm like, ooh, and I start doing something in the kitchen. So I'm like, I'm not thinking of the 100 things at once.
Mhm.
I'm like just constantly all over the place. I really love brain dumps and I've done brain dumps for a long time.
Mhm.
And so that for me, if I ever start to be like racy up here, I just do a brain dump and
Mhm.
then that solves that.
Yeah, and then you don't
But
have to think about all the things. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like when I'm talking to moms, it's like, yeah, they like there's so many people like even like you watch TikToks and like females being like, I identify as ADHD and I had no idea until I was 30 or 40. And then so I have so many people like that where they're like, oh yeah, I have ADHD. Almost every mom I communicate with. And like I could say like, oh yeah, I fit the bill based off of TikTok too. And then my kids, almost all of their friends are medicated. And like I'm not throwing any hate or shade on that because that's what you're told to do. Like when you have a teacher, a doctor, and a whole bunch of people saying, yeah, your kid needs to be medicated for them to be successful, like you follow that typically.
I think we've just
Um,
been trained to think
exactly.
that like this is normal and all we need
Yeah.
to do because it's normal, here's a med to fix it. Like
Yeah,
that's really what it comes down to. So
exactly.
it's an epidemic and that's where I'm here to say you've trained yourself to
Hmm.
have the racing thoughts. You've trained yourself to go from one thing to the next, not really being fully present and
Hmm.
hating your life. Like that's
Hmm.
really what that creates at the end of the day. You're
Yeah.
overwhelmed, you're exhausted, like
Yeah.
literally overwhelmed and exhausted all the time. Like if you want to know if you have racing thoughts and it's serving you or not, just ask yourself, am I exhausted and overwhelmed all the time? If the answer is yes,
Yeah.
because that's where
Probably.
I was. I speak from truth of where I was. I know how it felt to just not ever get like I accomplished a lot too. Like that's the thing.
Yes,
I built
exactly.
businesses. I did all kinds of stuff. Like I went through anesthesia school doing
Hmm.
this, right? But it was maladaptive because it was making me sick. I was
Hmm.
exhausted and overwhelmed all the time.
Yeah.
So, yuck. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so anyways, I think this was a good place for us to end, right? Like I think that we really got to it. We didn't really talk as much about the Olympics as we thought we would, but that kind of seems to be the case with us. So whatever, it's all good. So
Yeah.
if you're watching us on YouTube, go ahead and give us a like. Go ahead and subscribe and let us know what some of your questions are, what some of your thoughts are, because let's be honest, ADHD, that's a big hot point for a lot of people. So I want to hear, like, are you pissed at me? So, but if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast, go ahead and give us a 5 star as well and leave a comment. But with that, we are going to wrap up TMI advice you didn't want for today. Did I say that right? I don't know, but we're wrapping up today. So good job, me. All right, bye, guys. Thanks so much for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue hanging out with us, and don't forget to subscribe.